Welcome to Ride to Success. Today I chatted with Jamie Anderson. Jamie's journey from a small town in Australia to becoming an influential figure in both the academic and cycling worlds, and eventually the co-founder of the Flandrian Hotel in Belgium, is a story of passion, perseverance, and the pursuit of excellence. In this podcast, Jamie discusses the financial constraints that fueled his early entrepreneurial spirit and the evolving needs of the cycling community, among many other topics. But before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, please follow and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. It helps us to grow and continue to bring great guests. Now back to the show. Welcome to Ride to Success. Jamie, it is an honor to have you here. Your career in academia, business, cycling, it shows so much of your entrepreneurial spirit. And this is kind of your journey. I've been following on LinkedIn for a few years now, and it's very inspirational. And kind of that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, to find out a bit more about you and hopefully learn a few lessons along the way. So I wanted to start because there's obviously there seems to be overarching narrative throughout your life, and I want to understand a bit more about what sparked this kind of entrepreneurial spirit that you have, and where did that come from? Where did it originate?
Yeah, Pedro, it's really great to be here, and it's really fantastic to meet you in person in a way after we've been in contact for so many years. And yeah, it's a really fascinating question, because I mean, I grew up in a little country town in Australia. I'm not in the bush, but it was in kind of a farming area, and I had 6 brothers and sisters, and it was. We didn't have it easy, if you know what I mean. I mean, we grew up on a housing estate, and from a young age, I kind of had my passion for my sport, which was cycling. And I realized pretty quickly, if I wanted to be able to afford a nice bike and tires to race on, that I would have to, pay for that myself, because my parents didn't really have the resources to support. So I guess from a pretty young age, I was kind of hustling and working and juggling jobs and my sport and trying to get things done. And I think that's something which, I sort of carried with me through life, because, I think when you think about entrepreneurs, what drives entrepreneurship? Well, it's either a need. So in my case, I had a need to earn money, or it's an aspiration, which means, some people are just entrepreneurial because they've been in an environment where they're encouraged and inspired, and that's more inspirational based. And I think that's sort of how my life evolved. It started off with a need, but then it sort of evolved more into an inspiration, because I love entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so there is clearly some points here that we need to kind of unpack. So let's start with the cycling. The cycling seems to be a line that follows. It threads a lot of your experience. So what initially sparked your interest in cycling? How was it that came about?
Well, I guess it also, related to my family situation, because it was a pretty crowded house at home. So, to get out and have some space and some freedom, I started just riding my bike, very young as a kid. And at that time in Australia in the 1970s, BMX was kind of taking off, late 70s, early 80s. And that was for me just an awesome freedom. So my cycling actually started dirt, BMXing, dirt bike jumping down by the river and dodging the occasional black snake and stuff. But, I really liked it. And then, it's kind of by luck, by chance, there was a family living around the corner from where I grew up. And their son, a guy called Sean O'Brien, he was really a top cyclist. He went on to Commonwealth Games and World Championships and stuff like that. And I was friends with his younger brother. And I from my BMXing, I did some racing there. And then I went along to the velodrome, because although I grew up in a very small town, we had a passionate cycling community. And in this town of like 11,000 people, we had an Olympic standard velodrome, which was really amazing. It didn't have much around it. It was a great track. It had a shed beside it and stuff. But that's where it kind of started for me. So I went from BMX and then onto the track when I was like 13, 14, and that led onto the road. And, state, national level as a junior. So yeah, it was an early passion for me.
Wow. Okay. So you were able to progress. I mean, okay. So first, obviously, that's always, it seems to be the kind of the common thread to a lot of children getting into riding bikes or wanting to have a bike, because it gives them that sense of freedom, and I think that's an important aspect. Like that any person that rides a bike will relate to,
Mhm.
that being able to be out and about and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, the other
But to
thing, of
be,
course, the other thing is that most sport in Australia involves physical violence. Like rugby and Australian football. And I was a really small, skinny kid, so I used to just get destroyed. Like I hated football, I hated rugby. So I also realized, that as a skinny kind of small kid, the bike was amazing because I could be really competitive and I could climb. And so, yeah, although Australia cycling wasn't really popular in Australia at that time, it was just sort of taking off. It was just the period just before guys like Robbie McEwen and Stu O'Grady.
right.
Yeah, it kind of fitted my stature and I loved it. I really loved it. I wasn't really
Yeah.
into team sports, but I really liked the individual aspect of it.
So you mentioned as well that you went to national junior level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is that was that at that time? You mentioned there wasn't necessarily a big cycling culture in Australia because you were just below the Robbie McEwen, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Was did you were you able to progress further in terms of your sporting career as an
Yeah.
athlete in that at
So
that time?
I guess I was like literally like 3 or 4 years too early in a way because the Australian Institute of Sport was set up, the road program was set up like 2 years or so after I more or less stopped, when I
Oh,
made the choice. So it came to the point where I was like 18 years old and it got complicated. My dad became ill and it was just got all too difficult to get to races and stuff. And then I got offered a scholarship to go to university. So it was just a very
uh,
pragmatic decision, like I have this dream for cycling, but there were so many things stacked against me in terms of especially the financial aspects, travel.
yeah.
And then I had this chance to go to uni, which none of my brothers and sisters had gone to uni. So it was also kind of a big, I wouldn't say pressure, but it was a big opportunity for me. So, for the next 20 years, I pretty much
Definitely, yeah.
moved away from competition in cycling and then went for my university studies and academic career. Yeah.
Yes, so that's. I mean, you haven't mentioned, but from I think from what I understand from my research, you're you're very well. You are very good academically at school. You performed very well, and the reason why you got the scholarship, if I'm not mistaken, is because you were very good academically. So you were awarded that scholarship to go and study business. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Or how was that? Did that work?
Well, I think you see that with a lot of athletes, and I think for any parent who has a kid, and you always want to push them academically, but I think actually the other thing with racing, particularly or like any sport at an elite level, is you really have to be disciplined, and so throughout my teenage
Yeah,
years, when I was doing my studies, as I said, I had to work because I had to pay for all my stuff, and then I had to do my studies. So I think I wasn't really conscious of it at the time, but I think I became, I was really, really disciplined. I mean, the thing about sport as well is you know how to set a goal, you know how to break it down
yeah,
into actionable kind of targets and all that stuff. So I just took what I learned from cycling in a way into my academic career and also having a competitive spirit, like, and I think you see that with a lot of athletes. They often do well, later in life in business because they can set goals. Um, they can
yeah,
sacrifice, and the other thing is, like with the sport, especially cycling, it's not about instant gratification. It's not like you get out and do 3 training sessions and you win. It's day after day, rain, cold, so it really does develop a resilience and a fortitude to get things done. And I think that was a big part of, the success that I had in my,
yeah.
my career, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely quite a few lessons in there that you are able, kind of with the sport, it teaches you that is consistency, is showing up, as training, as you mentioned, setting goals, and that in between goals, intermediate goals, and then towards a final goal, it does kind of set you up. But I think you need to have as well a mindset because sometimes you may have the talent and you are able to very well succeed and progress professionally as an athlete, but sometimes you maybe not be able to do that, but you have the work ethic that allows you to progress as far as possible in the sport.
I think there is an aspect of that as well. I mean, one of the things I realized was, because I kind of stopped when I was a junior, I didn't go onto a pro career. So I didn't really work in a team environment. So that did, I think, affect, my early stage career, because I was very individually driven, very focused individually. I had very low tolerance for people who I thought were kind of lazy. Like I was like, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was like, if you're not working 16 hours a day, there's something wrong with you, like you're lazy. So I wasn't really sympathetic to people, actually. So I think that was also, I think you do see that also with some sports people, particularly the more individual sports, that, sometimes they can lack a bit of empathy, be a little bit too, driven, a little bit too hardworking, and there's a risk as well.
You, any person that is, has some kind of entrepreneurial spirit will be driven, and that will require effort. And sometimes you're not able to maybe set the boundaries or be sympathetic towards other people, because that you have that goal that you recognize in yourself the potential, but maybe sometimes it's only you that recognizes that. So you have that arrow that you want to follow, but in the process you don't see what's behind, what's on the other side, because you have blinders on. What did you study at uni, and why did you choose it?
Yeah, so I mean, I started. I didn't really know what a career was, as a teenager, because I was from a pretty blue collar environment. But then I got to uni, and then eventually I got an interest in economics and business. So that's kind of where my career went. And there was a reason for that as well. Like I did come from a lot of hardship as a kid. So making money for me also was it was a goal, it was a target. Didn't want to have to go through, or my kids to go through what I went through as a kid. So I was pretty driven. And so I was looking at, okay, there's things that I enjoy. I've always loved teaching. I always loved, learning. I love social science, politics, stuff like that. But pragmatically, where I thought I could make a living, and a good living, was more in the business field. So that's why I eventually pursued, strategy, innovation management stuff. And so I finished my studies in Australia at Melbourne University. Then when I was in 29, I took a job at London Business School. So that was really a huge step, a very, reputed institution. Yeah. So I moved to London. So I spent 5 years there, early on in my academic career, specializing on strategy. And then I took a job. There was a new business school being started in Berlin, the European School of Management Technology. And I was offered a place there. So I went and started the strategy department there, which was pretty amazing. And that sort of took me through, but I was always also the nice thing about business school was that, I had my research, I had my teaching, MBA, stuff like that. But very early on, I was doing executive education, working with practicing managers, and I really, really liked that and did well at it. And that eventually also led to me realizing, okay, I've got a skill set, which was my strategy stuff, but I also had a bit of a talent, and that was just communicating and, in a way, entertaining people. So, in my 30s also, I started more and more with keynote speaking, conferences and events and stuff like that, with a very good agency, Speaker Ideas, in Amsterdam. So that's kind of how the career evolved. But it was always academia, strategy, innovation management, and then the speaking. And then, of course, I was still playing with cycling on the side, but just as a hobby. I wasn't competing.
Yeah.
I wasn't competing through my 20s and 30s.
So so you kind of rushed us through the kind of a lot of years there.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, interested in understanding how the transition from living in Australia and deciding to come to the UK to teach in the London Business School. I'm interested in that transition because it, again, I think it reveals a lot of your character as an entrepreneur. So can you give us a bit more context into, like, what motivated you to do that, make that choice?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I was very clear about it, right? I mean, because okay, I didn't make it as a pro cyclist, or I didn't make it as an Olympian, but in a way, in the academics, there's also an Olympics, right? I mean, there's the
Yeah,
Ivy
yeah.
League schools. So again, I think I brought that competitive kind of attitude, and I said, okay, if I'm going to make it in academia, then I really wanted to come to Europe. I just wanted. Australia for me was far away, and I was, Melbourne's a great city, but I really wanted to see the world. So I said, okay, in Europe, the top three schools are IMD, INSEAD, and London Business School. I'm going to get a job at one of those. That was what I said to myself, and then I visited and I met people and then I was lucky enough to get offered a job. And well, luck, we make our luck, but
Well,
I went
yes.
taking the ground at those places, introduced myself, said, this is what I do. I was like 28 years old at that time, but a pretty awesome guy at London Business School, a guy called Ian Hardy, who headed the executive education division. He liked me, saw some potential, and then he convinced the school to hire me. So so that's kind of how it started with London Business School. And then,
So,
I mean, the other thing about the entrepreneurial side is that, business school is not like teaching, I don't know, the classics at Oxford or something. I mean, when you're in a business school environment, it's very high pressure. I mean, you've got to publish or you're out, But the other thing also is that you, as a faculty member, even as a young one, you get 1 day a week for consultancy, right? Because there's the idea of this with business schools is that professors should have a contact with the real world. So from very early on, I also had my own consultancy business, and I was specialized that time on strategy in what I call complex operating environments. And again, that was my curiosity in the world and stuff. But I specialized on helping businesses to function and succeed in really difficult environments like war zones and deep rural areas and slums. So I was doing research in Nigeria and in the slums of Mumbai and traveling to Congo and stuff like that, mostly with telecom companies at that time. It was pretty fun. Actually, I liked it at that time, and
that's pretty interesting. I can't help myself think about the current situation the cycling industry is going through, and the comparison that, well, what you decided. Well, granted, a few years ago, to specify in very difficult scenarios, very difficult, challenging situations. So, but obviously there is. Actually, I'm quite curious. Why did you decide to have to do consulting for businesses, strategy consulting for businesses that operated in very difficult or challenging circumstances, or in countries? I don't know. Because that's an interesting thing to explore, perhaps.
Yeah, I guess it was, again, it's like serendipity, right? You have accidental luck. So I was at London Business School teaching executive education, and that time, early 2000s, the mobile telecoms was like booming, right? So I was working a lot with Nokia and Vodafone and these companies. And just, of course, as the industry grew, their focus also shifted from the developed markets like North America, Western Europe, towards the developing markets. So me working and teaching with those companies strategy, then I had to also stay ahead of the curve for where they were going. So, and also at that time, I was lucky enough to be a visiting professor at the Indian School of Business, because that was a partner of London Business School. So I was traveling to India teaching, and I was teaching on programs for these companies like Vodafone, and then meeting these amazing people who were pushing into these really complicated markets like Bihar in the far north or the slums. And I said, hey guys, can you take me there? I'd like to come and see what you're doing and learn about that. So I learned a lot in India. And then, as things evolved, then Africa evolved. And I'd already learned a lot about what they'd done in India. And I started working with operators in Africa, and in a way, sort of transitioning a lot of what I'd learned that worked from the Indian market. Not only transitioning like with my research and sharing my experience, but also connecting people. I connected a lot of the Indian guys who I work with leaders and managers in Africa. It was a fascinating time. And, the interesting thing, what you say now is like the world is complex in the bike industry now. But what I didn't think about 20 years ago, I was working in the most complicated business, is that today everything is very complex. Everything is complicated now with digitalization and climate change and geopolitical instability. So, we'll come to where I am now. But I mean, that's, in a way that was incredibly enriching for me, because what I then started to realize also, that to succeed in those business environments wasn't so much about strategy. It was about people. It was about leadership. It was about understanding complexity. I learned a lot about how to do that as a leader, as a manager. And that's kind of what I do today, actually. What I do today is work across the board in terms of working with leaders to understand complexity. But the early kernel from that experience came back from that early 2000s period of, flying to India and Africa and these kind of places.
Interesting. That good point there. I guess it always comes down to people. Being a leader, it's about, well, this is my opinion, it's about being able to communicate your ideas, your thoughts well with people. That's my opinion. But it's interesting that you also mentioned it it's helped you develop your skills, your career, to understand that key aspect of leadership and management.
You probably experienced that in your life as well, right? I mean, consultants are needed, and they are awesome in helping you make sense of complexity. But strategy at the end of the day is like 15%, 10% of the success. The success comes from doing things and getting things done with and through other people. And you see that with a lot of strategy professors, academics, that later, the further they get in their careers, most of the strategy people tend to move towards leadership and change, because they realize that's really what's more important.
Yeah, that is quite that's quite a thought to quite a an idea to unpack there. So with this new understanding, with your new experience in London Business School, at what stage were you able to did you fulfill that drive that you had back in Australia, or wanting to work in these 3 top education establishments? At what point did you realize, yes, I've done this? What else is there need to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I mean, the thing was, because I was really driven and really hardworking. So by the time I was in my 36, 37, I'd achieved quite a lot, in terms of publications and the promotion and all that stuff. And I guess then I started to feel something was missing, and also, I got married, I had my kids, and, I was just working like hell. I was obviously under the pressure at the academic institution. Then I had my consultancy business. I was traveling all over the world. I was so, I think a lot of us get in that place in mid 30s, late 30s. Like, what the hell am I doing? Actually, I'm kind of there now. And so I'd had a very clear drive and vision of, that's what I want to get to. That's what I want to be. And then I got there, and I hadn't really thought about, well, what happens then? Do I just keep doing what I'm doing? And I think there's another fundamental shift I think that a lot of us experience in that phase, is that, when you start out your career, you're often, you study something like I did, because I think I can make a good career, I can make money out of it. You develop your technical skill set in a way. So I was a strategy guy. I did innovation management, and stuff. And I was really good at it, because I worked hard at it. But, so what I tried to do was then sort of say, okay, I'm good at what I do, but then I moved towards stuff that I think I'm passionate about. And that was travel, actually. So actually, these opportunities to go and visit India and Africa and stuff, it met my passion for travel and experience and discovering the world and stuff like that. So it was really great. But, what I started to increasingly realize was that, also, I think a lot of us do that in our career. You also have talents, right? So you have your technical expertise. You can be passionate. Some people are very passionate about their technical or academic field. I wasn't especially passionate about strategy, but I was good at it. But the other thing that a lot of us start to realize is that, okay, your talent zone is different. Like I said, so I started to realize my talent actually is more in, like I said before, connecting people. I'm a networker. I meet people, I listen to them, I understand, and I connect them. I always got great teaching scores because I really love to teach and make the classes fun, and I'm a good speaker, and so, and I really like that. But I got to a point, I think mid late 30s. I think, well, hang on a second, like actually 80% of my job I hate. I mean, I didn't like academic research. I didn't like grinding away with the stats and the quant stuff, and I didn't like the really academic publication stuff. But that's basically what you're measured on and rewarded for, And I hated all the stuff in the institution because academic institutions are very political. There's lots of committees and panels for this and everything else, and you get sucked into that. So what I started realizing, what I really love is I love the people stuff. I love the travel, I love the speaking, I love all that. But that's only 20-30% of my job. The other 70% I hate, and that started to really make me a bit miserable, actually. So
it does that to people.
Yeah. So that was kind of a bit of, and the life stage as well, because I had young kids and I was just never at home, and my wife wasn't happy with the situation. So that sort of resulted in a bit of an epiphany, and I said, okay, things need to change. That was like late 30s when I really said, I want to, have a bit of a reset. And part of that also was just having a lot of regret about not, having fulfilled my potential as an athlete, because I hadn't competed since I was like in my early 20s. So then the decision was, okay, I'm gonna have a bit of a break, a sabbatical, and I'm gonna go back and race again. And that was maybe 38, 39 when I said that.
So that was quite. So it's like a moment of I need a break. I need to do something about my life. Like it's not going as I wanted. Yeah, my family is taking the brunt of it. So throughout all of this time, throughout this drive in working in academic and management, you were not cycling, or were you being active at all, or you took a step out of it?
I got really into. I was working out through uni, and I was riding my bike, just like commuting, to get to and from uni. And I even worked as a bicycle courier in Melbourne for a little while when I was in my universities. So I was riding my bike. So I was in okay shape up until my early 30s, I think. And then, when the kids came, and then the promotions and more travel, and then, I got pretty unfit, like put on weight and stuff like that. So, and I think that's also really hard, if you've been an athlete at the elite level, and then you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see. And so there's
don't like see it.
I mean, the other thing was, it wasn't like a midlife crisis or something, like I didn't go off the rails, but it was like a reality check, and I spoke with my wife about what we really wanted and what would make us happy as opposed to make us rich, which is what I'd been driven for a long time, and that really brought us down to earth for a while. So I took a sabbatical. So when I was like 39, I said, okay, I'm going to take like a year and a half off, step back from a lot of the responsibilities, spend some time with my kids, travel with them, and get back on my bike. And that sort of 1 year plan turned into like 5 years, basically, where I just like into cycling and raced, got to the world level and got some medals in that level and stuff. And and then, obviously my family and career, I had, that the work stuff had to adapt to what I wanted to do now with my sport and my family. So that was also quite a pivot, professionally.
Yeah. I mean, that I think that's you were able to divert, I guess, your focus into a passion of yours, which was cycling. Throughout this period, were you like the sabbatical and beyond the sabbatical? Were you consulting on the side? Was this like a period in between?
So one of the things was, my kids were I think when I stepped away, my eldest was 6, that was Reese, my son, and my daughter Hannah was 4, and Charlie was 2. And I thought, I've got this 5 or 6 years really to be with them, as they grow. And so that was a big priority. So what I did actually is I stepped back, and again, I think we look at, we go through this career, we have our skills and technical expertise and all that stuff. Then you have your talents, and I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe I could leverage my talents a bit more, and that's what sort of led into me exploring, the TED platform and keynote speaking more seriously. And that took me 18 months, 2 years to really, really push. Like I wrote a book, and then, connect, like when I did with IMD and London Business School and INSEAD, so I'm going to go to the top. So then I said, okay, in the world, which are the world's best speaker agencies, So, Speaker's Corner in London and a few, and Speaker Ideas in Amsterdam. I said, okay, so I'm going to get into one of those. Then I just basically analyzed, well, what does it take to make it as a top keynote speaker, right? To get endorsed in a way. And so that sort of, again, like I said, as an athlete, you set a goal, you break it down, and I called it my guru project, right? I said, okay, if I want to become a guru, because those guys get paid a ridiculous amount of money for one talk, So imagine that if I could establish myself as a keynote speaker, and I get 2 or 3 talks in a month, that gives me lots of time to race my bike and spend time with my kids, So that was the goal then. Okay, I'm gonna establish myself as a keynote speaker, and that took about 2 years, right? Writing the book, getting my first TED talk, getting the attention of the speakers agencies, and then that really took off in a way. So for that next few years, that's pretty much what I did. So I was still having a visiting position at a business school here in Antwerp, very great school, Antwerp Management School, but just teaching a couple of programs there. But that was really nice because I kept my academic title. I could still call myself a professor. I was still writing and stuff like that. But I didn't have all those things as responsibilities that I mentioned I didn't like.
Right, yes.
And politics and all that stuff. I just came and taught a couple of master's courses, So I did that, and maybe 20% of my income, 15% of my income. Then the bulk of the income was coming from the keynote speaking, conferences and events and stuff like that. A little bit of consultancy, but not very much because that was the travel and all that stuff. So I was still in contact with a few of my existing clients, but I really geared that back for that time. So basically what I was doing, I was like I was earning enough in sort of 5 or 6 months of work. So I would sort of, follow the speakers season, because you have a lot of conferences and events early in the spring, like this period from March, April, May. And then you have a very busy conference period in September, October, early November. So what I realized was, okay, I could actually plan my cycling season around those 2 sort of periods, right? So I would train like hell and be in really good shape for the very early season racing. So I was actually going to Australia, South Africa, racing in January, February, like that. Then coming back to Europe, doing a few races. I'd be in really good form by March, so just smash it early season. And then from middle of March, traveling around the world, giving my keynote speeches and stuff like that. So sort of tapering, resting. And then from May, sort of early June, when the speaker season was sort of quietening down again, then I'd be like training full gas to have another peak in sort of August, which is when a lot of the UCI World stuff was on. And I'd just like be flying in August, September, and then back to keynote speaking again. So so it was really kind of well, basically from middle of June till middle of September, my family, little kids, my wife, we'd pack the car, we'd head to France, and I'd race in France for 2 months, like through the summer. So we did that for 6 years, actually. That was pretty much the model for 6 years, and it was really great. But then the kids got older. Yeah, well, it worked, I mean, I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
I was lucky to have the skills and the talents to enable that, but it was it
sure
didn't work out.
Quite. I mean, you kind of brushed off again quite a few details that I think we need to go back and like dive a bit more into that. Can I say elite amateur level?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you're doing UCI Master Series whilst traveling the world, delivering keynote speeches, which were some of them TED Talks. So it is that kind of that drive to pursue them. So let's focus for now on the cycling aspect. What were you able to satisfy that hunger that you, as you said earlier in the conversation, that you regretted or that you felt that was missing in your life through this pursuit of competition? Because you have raced it quite successfully.
Mm-hmm.
You have got a bronze medal in the UCI Amateur World Championships. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
So
in the World Masters Games. I got the bronze, but
okay,
I've got multiple UCI Gran Fondo World Series medals and wins. Yeah, I mean, it was one of the details I left out along the way was that when I was living in London, I went on vacation and I met a girl from Belgium. So my wife is Belgian; she's Flemish. So when I stepped away from academia, we moved back to Belgium. And, Pedro, I said, okay, I'm going to get back in shape. I'm going to race. And then, then I did my first kermesse in Belgium and I was killed, man, because the level here in Belgium, it doesn't matter what level you race in Belgium, from under 12s to the 70 plus masters, the level in Belgium is the highest in the world. So if you want to be competitive here, you have to be world level at any category, So we moved to Belgium and I spent the first 2 seasons just getting killed, like hardly finishing a race. And then I thought, okay, I've got to do this properly. So then I reached out for that period, that 5 years, my coach was Alan Davis, who's a former Australian professional, just an awesome guy. And he transformed me. I mean, he transformed me into, a pro athlete in a way. So, with his support, and I'm not kidding. I mean, I was training 25 hours a week, with on the bike, gym, core training, all that. I was living like a pro for almost 5 years, the first 5 years. And yeah, if you do that and you're racing masters, then, and of course I had the physiological abilities because I'd got to elite level as a junior.
Yeah, of course.
It's still, you had to chisel away a lot. It's like a Michelangelo sculpture, it starts as a big block of I was a big fat block, and then you have to carve it and carve it and carve it. But there was an athlete inside. It just took a while for that athlete to come out again. And that took about 2.5, 3 years. And then suddenly, from sort of 3 years in, I just started winning races and being competitive. And so that was an incredible feeling. And I think maybe even more wonderful than as a junior, or even what it would have been as a neo pro, because I was going to these world level events with my family. My wife, my kids were coming along, and that was just a fabulous experience. So, but the other thing was, I decided very early on I'm going to do it clean. I'm not going to do anything like that. And that, unfortunately, when I started 10 years ago, that the guys I was racing against, that was not, I'm sure, always the case. So that was where Alan was also my coach, was really inspiring for me. He said, look, you have ability and we've just got to get you to the higher ceiling of your ability against maybe some of the guys who are taking shortcuts. And what I also then understood, and what Alan helped me with, is, okay, with my physique, I'm like exactly the same race, size, height as a guy like Simon Gerrans or a Paolo Bettini, very, 168 centimeters tall, 62, 63 kilogram race weight, very explosive, decent sprint. But I'm not a pure climber. I'm not going to, win Paris-Roubaix. So that was also part of the strategy, that I had early on, was that, okay, I've got these capabilities. Let's pick and choose the events where I can do well. And then throughout the season, Alan and I would aim for 6, 7, 8 target events. And then I would go on podium, at those events. But I mean, the other thing that we did, which I think was phenomenal at the time because it was possible, was I looked for my age group classifications. Like at that time I was 40 to 45, and then I moved to 45 to 50. But what I did is I looked, who were the guys who won the UCI World Championships over the last 3 years in my age group classification? And then what I started to do was stalk those guys on Strava. So I created Excel spreadsheets, right? Because these guys were all uploading their data. So I could see what this guy's doing, his 5-minute power, 10-minute power, 20-minute power. And I was like, oh, shit, man, like, at my weight, I have to do 360 watts for 10 minutes to be competitive. And I was like, oh, man, like, how the heck am I going to do that? That's like 6 watts per kilo, 5.9 or something. So that's what Alan and I did. We said, okay, I've got to get to 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, 6 watts per kilo by that, world championship or whatever.
Right.
And so that was pretty, we did it, and the other thing I started to realize, was that, even if you have a head, because I raced as a junior and I raced the track, I still had the strategy stuff in my head, the tactics in my head. So I could win
the racecraft.
at the racecraft. So I just suddenly discovered that I could win against guys who were stronger than me. I could win against guys who were younger than me just by trying to race smart. And again, Alan was awesome there, really, really coaching me through that side of things. So yeah, it was just wonderful, wonderful few years of that.
So you mentioned your passion for traveling. You mentioned your realization of through leadership, through keynote speaking, through management, that people are key, understanding people and being able to communicate clearly with them. And obviously you mentioned cycling. So these three elements, I think, come very nicely together in that the fact that you didn't mention it. Well, you mentioned, but you moved at some point you moved from London to Belgium. So can you just first explain why that was the decision? Was that like to have a better lifestyle?
My wife's family is here, obviously, so it was good for her and good for our kids to be close to family. So that was it. And my cycling, I realized that there's no better place in the world to be if you want to make it in cycling than Belgium, even as a master. So for me, that was also a real motivator. So that's why we chose to come here. And Belgium's actually a great country. If you think about quality of life and education and healthcare and all those things, it's a pretty amazing place. But it's the cycling country in the world. So if you're crazy about cycling, it's kind of where it is. But it's also we came to Belgium. I did my race. I did that. And then I think my last world level result was like 2019. So I won. UCI Gran Fondo World Series races that year. I became European champion for the time trial and second road race at the European Masters Championships. But I remember standing on the podium. 2019, just before COVID. Yeah, that was my last big year. I've got the medals are over there somewhere. But it was like, I remember standing at the podium for the European and I just didn't feel the same wow feeling anymore, of racing, like not every year was full on, like I had sort of big years every 3 years or so. If I was changing age group classification, I'd do a big year and stuff. But that's where I met my current business partner at my Flandrian hotel, Bernard Morteman. And he's an awesome guy. I met him in 2018 and he's a fascinating person. He's been a professional footballer. He had a cycling development team, a pro Conti team, but he's a mentor. We became friends. And then he started asking me questions, like there's one thing to, leverage your skills. It's another to get into your talent zone. It's nice to do work and then have your passion in parallel. But, Bernard was like pushing me, like, why can't you combine those two things? Why can't you combine your talents for speaking and motivating people and stuff and teaching with cycling? And I hadn't really thought that those two things could come together. That was the first thing. And the other thing that Bernard said is, what's your purpose actually? Because my purpose for the previous my purpose was just to make enough money to have a good life with my family and to race my bike. It was a very much a Bubble Anderson Welters family. That's my wife's name is Welters. That was my purpose, was us. But Bernard said, like, well, what's your bigger purpose and what impact are you going to have in the world, And that really started me thinking. And that then, in a way, triggered the next phase in my life from 2019 onwards, to where we are now.
Yeah, so that's where we come into the Hotel Flandrian chapter, where you find you are thinking about, well, there is a bigger purpose. There's a that I can think of, I can aim on. What is the spark that started you thinking about Hotel Flandrian as a place to? Well, you explain it. Why? What was the spark behind it?
I mean, it already kind of started happening before, maybe even before 2009. I wasn't really maybe conscious of it, but one of the things that I'd already started doing, I met Alan Davis. Alan's an awesome person, and he's like a father to me, but what I realized was that, there are a lot of professional athletes, professional cyclists who are brilliant athletes, but they struggle with life after cycling, in terms of establishing their next chapter, understanding their skills and talents and building on those and so on. So through working, so I was mentoring Alan professionally. He was coaching me as an athlete, and then I was mentoring and supporting him in terms of the steps he was taking in his career after cycling. Then I met Michael Rogers, another great Australian cyclist, and then many, many others. So from when I met Alan, 2015-16, I actually started mentoring former professional cyclists. And this is career mentoring. There's always life and career mentoring. And I really love that. And I thought actually, this is something I can do. I have my experience. I've also made my shifts, and so I was getting a lot of enjoyment. It wasn't something I did professionally. I wasn't charging for it. I just did it because I felt it was meaningful. But the people I did it with made great steps and strides. Michael Rogers, if you look where he went in his career, it's just incredible what he's achieved now. Head of innovation and safety with the UCI, and really leveraging his talents. So that was something I was doing. And then COVID came along. Everything stopped. So my competition stopped. Everything stopped. We know what it was all like. And so together with Bernard, who was my friend, we started a podcast. We called it This Cycling Life. And we actually started interviewing these former athletes, professional athletes, cyclists, about their life transitions and stuff. So that sort of started out. And I had some time on my hands, so kids were getting older. They didn't want to go on vacation with mum and dad anymore. So I was sort of thinking, maybe I'd like to buy a little holiday house or something, maybe in France or Spain. But then I thought, I love the Flemish Ardennes, which is, the heart of the Tour of Flanders. So I was looking on this real estate site thinking, maybe I'll buy a little apartment. And then this hotel was for sale, this amazing hotel in an old Flemish farmstead. So a week later, me and Bernard, we just bought the farm. We just bought the hotel. Yeah, I mean, it was COVID. It was a good time to buy a hotel, right? But I come and
it was.
Like, maybe we should buy this hotel. It looks really cool. We could do some cool stuff with that. And Bernard and his wife were there. Yeah, this is awesome. And then, so we said, let's just buy it, So my wife's still kind of in shock, but we bought it. We ended up with a hotel. But very quickly we had a clear vision of what it could become, and the vision was that, it would become the foremost place in the world for people to come to, people who are passionate about cycling, of course, but people who are seeking meaning and purpose in their lives and wanting a place to come together to meet and speak with like-minded people. And that was really the vision for it. It is a hotel. We have beds, we have food and all that stuff, but actually it's much more a community, of like-minded people, which we've created. But I can tell you more. I'm sure you've got more questions about it, but that's kind of how it emerged by accident, serendipity again. But we're 3 years in now.
Yeah, I mean, I would be in shock if my partner told me that, I just bought a hotel. Let's start a business.
I didn't tell her I bought a hotel. I said, look, we had the opportunity to buy this hotel. What do you think? I spoke with the kids, I mean, my kids were all like, Dad, are you insane buying a hotel in the middle of COVID? But yeah, that was all okay. But also, when you think about it as an entrepreneur, right, there's, again, where does where does the drive come from? That's all, we're driven, right? And I was getting, I wouldn't say bored, but I was getting restless, because I'd been doing what I was doing in terms of the keynote speaking, the cycling, the time with it. I've been doing that for 7-8 years, and it was like, what's going next? And we get restless. So when entrepreneurs get restless, they look for the next thing. That's for sure, right?
Exactly.
The other aspect to it, which is just, we all have to, of course, acknowledge, is that we have different life stages, right? So I think what I did at 39, 40 was the right thing to do for my family, because my kids were young and they needed me around, and I needed to be, my wife wanted to get back to her career. She needed my support. So that was the time for me to actually lower my entrepreneurial expectations, in terms of whatever it might have been. But it was just time to say, look, just cool a little bit, And I did well with the speaking and everything like that. But by 2019, my kids weren't little kids anymore, right? I mean, they're in their mid-late teens, and they're going off to study, and they're thinking about. So, you're in a stage now in your life, often in that phase where, okay, there's expenses because kids are going off to uni and all that stuff. But in terms of the time demands and the energy demands that they need from you, it's just less, right? So that was also something very consciously that my wife and I talked about, was that it was a very clear contract. It's not going to be easy. And my promise to her was it's 5 years. It's 5 years. We do it for 5 years. And it's going to be really tough the first 2 or 3 years. It's startup. It's going to be really hard work. I'm going to be away from home a lot and all that stuff. But from year 2, it'll get easier. Year 3, it'll be running smoothly. I won't need to be there as much. Year 4, it should be soft. And year 5, then we decide, do we exit? Where are we in our lives then? And then we agree the next phase. Okay. So I think message there is, we have to, as entrepreneurs, we can't just take these entrepreneurial steps or leaps without, the buy-in from our partner, with our family. And it's okay to slow down from time to time and then re-accelerate again, which is what I've been doing for the last 3 years with the hotel.
Yeah. Hope that Hotel Flandern. So for our listeners that might not know about Hotel Flandern, do you want to share what differentiates the hotel from any other hotel?
Yeah, the thing that kind of immediately that I saw, like with a hotel, location is everything, right? So the fact is that the Flandern Hotel is located smack in the middle of the triangle, which is in a way the Tour of Flanders. So you have Ghent, Geraardsburg, and you have Oudenaarde, and the Flandern Hotel's right in the middle. So it's within easy reach of most of the famous cobbled sections and climbs, the Oude Quademont, the Bosberg, the Muur, I ride these climbs on a weekly basis. They're all very close by. So that was the first thing, location. The second thing was, as a business school professor, of course, when the opportunity came up for the hotel, you sometimes have to just listen to your intuition, right? Did I,
it's very true.
I sensed, wow, this place has opportunity. So what makes it unique is the location. Secondly, if you look at that triangle that I just described, I did then go and after I bought the hotel, I then went to the Tourism Flanders, right? And I said, do you guys have any market research, any data on how many people come to this region? They said, yeah, of course we have. We've done these studies. So they shared a report with me called Who is the Cyclist, which was published a year before I bought the hotel. It was amazing, right? So Pedro, can you believe there are 2 inbound cycling cyclists, tourists to that triangle every year? 200,000 come in, right? And how many full concept cycling hotels do you think are in that triangle? None.
Well, I imagine 0.
None, right? There were bed and breakfasts and general hotels, and some hotels that say they're a cycling hotel, but actually they just have a photo of Eddie Merckx on the wall and a dusty garage to put your bikes. So there was none. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. So that was the second thing. The third thing is what the research showed us, which again, intuitively we kind of knew, was that the market is predominantly the English-speaking countries. So it's the United Kingdom and Scotland, Ireland. You have North America, you have Australia, and you have the Nordics. So a lot of guests coming in from Denmark, Norway in particular, and then, of course, the Netherlands, which is right on the doorstep. So those markets are there. People are coming in. And the other thing that the market research report showed, in fact, as a cyclist, you know it, right? The report basically looked at the guest journey, everything from 3 months before they come to arriving at the airport to getting to the hotel. It's a big headache because, you have to find where you're going to ride. If you arrive at the airport, at Zaventem Airport in Brussels, with 5 or 6 guys and bikes, how the heck are you going to get to your hotel, right? So that's a headache. When you get to the hotel, where do you put your bikes and your bike cases? And you're going to be there for a week cycling, sometimes in the rain. Where do you wash your clothes? So what we did is, together with Bernard, because we had so much experience, we looked at the whole guest journey, and then we basically developed the whole value proposition of the hotel to be perfection for cyclists. Because, as a hotel, we're a 100% cycling hotel. If you book if you, for example, we are on channel. We use booking.com mainly for the North American market, just for visibility. But whenever we get a booking on booking.com, we immediately email the person. We say, why are you coming? And if the person says, oh, because, there's a rock concert happening in Gerardsberg, and we say, well, sorry, we cancel your reservation. We're a cycling hotel. Okay. So we're very selective with that. So that creates a very unique atmosphere at the hotel because everybody are cycling. Most of them
Interesting.
Describe. And the other thing that we've done with the hotel is it just lives and breathes cycling. So you walk into the clubhouse. We commissioned one of Belgium's top pop artists to do art throughout the whole hotel. We've got a gallery, a dedicated commercial art gallery, where we exhibit some of the world's top cycling photographers. And then, of course, as you well know from my LinkedIn posts, I've always collected bicycles. So I have a pretty amazing collection of X-Pro team bikes. I've got about 150 bikes in my collection, and there's about 40 or 50 of those bikes on display at the hotel. Bikes of Tom Bone and Cancellara, Sagan, Mark Cavendish, and Andre Greipel, you name it.
Yeah.
But not only can you see the bikes, we've just launched a couple of months ago, we've launched the world's first X-Pro pro bike hire service. So you can actually come to the hotel, ride up the Old Aquadamont on the bike of Tom Bonen or Cancellara or Matthew Heyman, if you like. So we think what we've done at the hotel is pretty unique. It's unique.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And of course, when you build something like that, then people come.
Yeah, people notice it, and it's definitely worth a visit if you are into the Flemish Ardennes or just fancy a trip to Belgium. Definitely something to put in your bucket list. And I want to kind of slightly change the gears, so to speak. And I want to try to understand, because obviously you have a lot of experience in business and leadership, and I'm interested to know your opinion on what you think the kind of the evolving needs of the global cycling community, and like how businesses, like the one, for instance, you started, but how business can address to serve cycling enthusiasts better.
Oh wow, man, that's a big that's a big question. It's a big question. I guess there's different angles to it. So one of the things that is, I think, really will change, it will change soon, is that in any like the cycling industry is a bit broken at the moment, right? And here, if we start with components and bikes, right? Okay, so if you look, what's happened there is that sometimes in industries you start to become engineering or design led, right? So we've seen that. So you start seeing that firms are pushing more innovation, more functionality, and it happens across industries. And what happens there is that they overshoot the needs of most consumers, right? So if you look at Shimano right now, it's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy because everything has gone electronic, right? I mean, they're pushing towards electronic, but not only they're pushing towards electronic, if you look at the median group set price, it's escalating. So, you want a Shimano 105, which 10 years ago was considered sort of entry level, for a decent road bike. I mean, it's ridiculous. The price now, it's $1,500 or something like that, €1,500. That's crazy, right? So what you have in the moment in the component world is a very unhealthy duopoly between Shimano and SRAM, right? And because of that duopoly situation, the market power that they have, that is in a way pricing many people who would like to step into active gravel cycling or road cycling, not to mention youngsters. Like if I was a youngster today, as I was back in the day, then I'd be priced out unless I could, of course you buy a second-hand one. But okay, so there's a problem there. So I think what we will see, and we're already seeing it, maybe you've seen L2, which is the Chinese road component set manufacturer. They will come. you know, they will come. There will be a third player in the market. They're currently in the market with a semi-electronic group set equivalent to, say, a 105 for 1/3 of the price. Okay, so I think that's a very healthy development. It's a healthy development, and it needs to happen because it's not healthy there. The other thing, you know, I think which has become unhealthy is just the industry pushed everybody towards disc brakes. Why? Because it pushed, you know, the margins up. It pushed, you know, people make more money in the industry out of it because of the servicing in the shops and all that stuff. Is it good for the consumer? Not in Belgium. We don't have mountains, you know. So it was, you know, it was like again a very, very big push there, which again pushed the median price of bikes up. But even more insidious than that, the bigger disaster has been the whole push in design towards aerodynamics and integration. You know, if we look at cabling, complexity today. You know, try to change a headset bearing on a Cervelo S5. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? So again, there's something where the industry, in terms of components and bikes, has really moved away or has lost sense actually with what makes sense for consumers. So I think that again, hopefully, will change, will be addressed, and we'll come back to some sort of middle ground. And we're seeing it already. The industry's it's a lot of the problem, not just COVID in terms of people bought a lot of bikes, but when you start pushing the median prices of bicycles up by 30-40% in a period of 4 or 5 years, we're seeing that there's a bit of a kickback there. So does that make sense? I mean, that would be my take, you know, on and that sort of one. The other aspect there is what you saw with, you know, I think again you've seen it with apparel as well. You've seen it with accessories. Again, you've seen an obsession with premium, you know, pushing people towards premium and luxury, and that market with the Rafas and the dozens of others has become extremely crowded. And in any market where you have, you know, too many competitors going after the same customer segments with similar value propositions, then what happens? You know, margins decline and companies go bankrupt. So, yeah, I think that's another another trend we've seen. What's your take on it, Pedro? What you think about it?
Yeah, I think there is definitely cycling as a whole is becoming unaffordable. Is obviously the prices are rising, but also joined with the inflation is it just it becomes unsustainable. There is as well the COVID stock, people stocking, dealers, distributors, shops, the stocking up, and it's kind of created a massive backlog. And now it's just there is so much, but that is discounted. And I think there is something also about how the brands need to address a broader customer segment, not just focus on that very niche cycling enthusiastic, and just open up their strategies and their communications in how they talk and welcome people in, from starting from children, making it more open, more inclusive, and not so difficult for parents to get their kids bikes, because that's where you start. And then again, there's the aspect of, which has been done, but is the aspect of brands also needing to cater to woman-specific cycling needs, and that has been started, but there is still quite a bit that needs to be done. So I think in terms of the community aspect, and in kind of the business, the model is kind of needs to change, I think. But I can't give you how it can change. I don't know. I don't have that insight into how specifically how it can change. But in terms of a grassroots engagement with children, with people that are not into, like, very enthusiastic about it, but maybe have an interest, or just want to try out. I think there is a huge opportunity there that is not being explored by brands that just focus on that very like small percent of people that want the latest and greatest of bikes and equipment and apparel and so on. So that's where I see that brands need to shift in order to be able running in 10 years, perhaps.
I think we will see it. As with industry, there's cycles, there's waves, there's a big shakeout that will happen in the next 18 months, 2 years. And some of that maybe for the best. The industry needs to change. There needs to be some reconfiguration.
Exactly, yeah.
But definitely, I think, hopefully, because you look at now, for example, the release of the new Decathlon models, Van Rysel, great bikes, but still not using Chinese components, not actually using, very, very good, but alternatively branded carbon wheels. You could come to market with a very, very high performing bicycle at half the price, actually, that they're selling them for right now. But that'll take a little bit of change in perception from the consumers as well. I think if you remember you won't remember when I was a kid in the 80s, it wasn't called Shimano. It was called something which was a bit more offensive, where there was a T in the middle of the she. But, and that was how people looked at Asian components coming from Japan at that time. So I think there will be a big shift in the coming couple of years. We see it happening in automotive with the Chinese automotive players coming in.
Yes, of course, they're coming in big in the automotive industry. Yeah.
So I think for brands like Canyon, Decathlon, those direct-to-market brands, I think there will be even a shakeout for those guys in the next couple of years with Chinese competition coming more direct. And
for sure, yeah, that is already happening. It needs to be like more scale, but yeah, it's already happening. I think this conversation has been quite well-rounded. There is a few questions that I would like to ask you more. So obviously we have been talking about your entrepreneurial spirit, about cycling, leadership, but I didn't ask you a key question, which is, what does success look like to you?
Well, it's a good one. It's changed a lot. As I said, for me, my idea of success was, family, living my potential as an athlete. That was, what I, for a long time, was aspiring towards. And I think I was very, very fortunate in that, those things that, my wife and I talked about back in 2010 in terms of what we wanted for us, for the kids, my passion for cycling, her getting back to her career. Yeah, we felt very, very lucky. I think by 2017, 18, we'd pretty much done everything that we'd set out to do. We have wonderful relationships with our kids. They're just great. Wonderful relationship with my wife. I had the chance to race my bike all over the world. And that's when I met Bernard. And as I said, when Bernard said, well, what are you here for now? What's the purpose and impact? So at the moment, obviously the Flandrian, I want to make it a success, but it's not about just making it success on commercial grounds. Secondly is I really do believe we have an impact. We have so many people who come into us who are, where you are in your life or career and who have really meaningful visits with us at the hotel, wonderful conversations over dinner, around the table that often lead into ongoing mentoring or friendship in many cases. So I think Bernard and I are really passionate about that we do believe we can have an impact with the people who visit us. And that's also formal in a way, because we do run, workshops at the hotel, seminars. We have what we call Think Week. So we have a lot of executives, busy leaders, entrepreneurs who come and spend sometimes 3, 4, 5 days with us just to ride their bike, just to be in an environment where they can think, slow down, be inspired, with conversations. Eric Min, the CEO of Swift, he did a Think Week with us last year, and many other C-levels from the industry have been with us as well. So yeah, that's a great feeling, when I'm out riding my bike with Eric Min and we're talking about meaningful stuff and where he's going with his business, what I'm doing. But that also often cascades into the third area, because what we do at the hotel is we also have a scholarship program. So what's very important for us is, we have to make the business successful, profitable. But success for us is then what we can do with the channeling some of that profit into our scholarship program. So last year we had about 25, 26 female and male athletes come through the hotel, and we give them a full scholarship. So we give them accommodation, we give them a car, living allowance, stuff like that, and they stay with us. Eric Min donated to that program when he was with us last year. So yeah, that's an amazing feeling. We have a lot of, in a way, what we're looking at with the scholarship is for kids who were like me when I was 18 years old, right? I mean, they have talent, but for one reason or another, they haven't gone onto a national program, or there isn't a national program, or they don't have the means, to come and spend a few months racing in Europe. So the program at the moment is mostly skewed towards the Commonwealth countries. Me being Australian, of course, we look at Australia and New Zealand. We have a very good relationship with the Scottish Cycling Academy. So we've got a bunch of Scottish athletes come through.
Okay.
And then we have a few athletes also coming in from, we've had athletes from Israel. We've had athletes from Finland. We've had athletes, we're looking at the moment at an athlete from Turkey, and desperately trying to get a visa for a very talented young cyclist from Iran. He's Azerbaijani Iranian. Not easy. We're trying to get that visa sorted out now, but that's having those young people around the hotel. It's awesome for us. I mean, we love it because we can also mentor them. We not just in terms of sporting support, but also emotional, professional support. And they have the opportunity to meet these amazing business people, entrepreneurs who come in. So it's a very symbiotic sort of relationship. And the other thing, of course, is that for the guests who come in, the entrepreneurs, the business people, I mean, they're inspired to have elite athletes around the hotel, sometimes going off to watch them race and ride with them as well. So,
of course,
so for me, success is sort of what we're trying to do with the Flandrian now, is success in a bigger way, and then seeing eventually how we might even cascade that. We, of course, down the line, there's a possibility that we will franchise the concept and launch Flandrians in other countries. But the plan there wouldn't just be franchising the commercial business; it would also be franchising the philanthropic activities as well and replicate,
of course,
in other countries. Yeah. So we'll see.
It looks like you are reach a point where you are giving back. You found the purpose of inspiring a new generation. And now it comes to the part of the podcast that kind of is a tradition that I started with the podcast, which is to ask every guest leaves a question for the next guest. So my previous guest left you this question, and here it is. Do you think cycling has the power to change the world?
Yes, I do. On many levels, right? I mean, on the first level, we have a crisis in the world right now, and that's a climate crisis. So, yes, absolutely. I see it every single day where I live here in Antwerp, in Belgium. The number of people who are now riding an electric bike, but they're cycling a bike and they're riding past my house commuting to work instead of a ton worth of steel that they're on a highway and burning fossil fuels. So. I think at that level, there's so much more opportunity, so much more to be done, with cycling infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. So I think it can change the world there, definitely. The other thing, I really believe in is that if you look at just the health and well-being benefits, cycling is marvelous, and what really inspires me, Pedro, is the many female riders that we have come and stay with us at the hotel who are relatively new to cycling. What you often hear from the women riders, we actually every year we have a women's cycling summit. We've done that for the last 3 years.
Okay.
We talk about issues related to cycling, and we have content creators and journalists and pro athletes and stuff. But it's marvelous talking to women about how empowering cycling is for them as well. And I think that also has a very big role to play across countries and cultures, right? So there's a big push here in Belgium, for example, with the Moroccan community to encourage female Moroccan women, women to start cycling, and that becomes empowering because it gives freedom and all that kind of stuff. So I think yes, on that level, it is. And the other thing, I see with it on the third level is that I really believe cycling is a connector, right? I mean, if you look at what we do at the hotel, we have a mini United Nations there, right? So yes, we have had Israeli athletes, but also we're trying to get a visa right now for an Iranian athlete. and it's very likely that those athletes will be in the house at the same time. So we see that cycling breaks down difference, religious, political, whatever you might say, because there's the bike
is a good leveler,
great leveler, and it really does connect people. So I think that's that's something else, the cycling diplomacy that we try to do a little bit
a mini UN,
a bigger level as well. So yes, I believe cycling can change the world.
Now is your turn to put someone else on the spot. What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
I would ask them what was the experience in your life that shaped you the most profoundly?
That's a very good question. That will definitely that'll definitely make people think. So Jamie, thanks for your time. I've learned quite a few things along our conversation.
Thank you very much, Pedro. I've loved the conversation. And of course, there is a cobblestone waiting for you at the Flandrian Hotel. So look forward to seeing you there soon.
Wow, what an amazing conversation. Jamie Anderson's story is a compelling narrative of how cycling can influence a life's direction. I hope this conversation inspired you to pursue your passions with dedication and strategic insight. Now, don't forget to tune in to the next week's podcast where my next guest will answer James' question. Until then, thanks for listening.